coincidentally work with. And today we're just going to do a follow-up from the first podcast we done. So thank you again, James, for agreeing to do a follow-up.
Pleasure. Thank you for asking me.
So yeah, and when we first spoke the last time, we talked about mental health and how things were going in like the world and society and just in general. So from the last time we spoke, how is your mental health doing like at this moment in time?
Interesting question. I think, if I'm being honest, probably struggled with the second lockdown over winter more than the first one over the summer. Or sort of last year, kind of, we got locked down in March, didn't we? But we kind of got lucky really with the weather and stuff like that. The weather was a lot better sort of this time last year than it has been over the last few weeks and stuff. And I found like during the first lockdown, even though kind of, sort of the world sort of came to a bit of a halt, you could still go out for a walk in the evening, you could get out and get some fresh air, do you know what I mean? And sort of things like that. And then kind of over the summer, the lockdown relaxed a little bit, didn't it? And kind of you could still go out and see friends and stuff. And I think, like I mentioned probably on the last one, or I can't remember if I mentioned it or not, but I was got married last year and was lucky enough that we could still have a reception where there was up to 30 people and things like that. But sort of going into the second lockdown, the one that sort of kicked in over Christmas and stuff like that, that was tough. You know what I mean? Not being able to see family and everything. Luckily, like I say, I'm here with my wife and my stepson, so it's not as if I was on my own. But yeah, I don't know. I just found it was, it was because of the winter. It was dark. It was miserable. The weather was horrible. So it kind of, and then working during the day. So yeah, there wasn't that much opportunity to get out and get some fresh air and just, be able to see people. And obviously Christmas is a time that people want to see, family and friends and stuff. So, I still count myself lucky that I was here, with my wife and stuff. But yeah, I just found it a bit, yeah, I couldn't wait, for lockdown to start being relaxed, but safely, obviously. I'm not somebody who's opposed to the lockdown. I know some people, feel that, well, they have their views around, the lockdown not being required and stuff. But, I've followed all the guidelines, and I think, the evidence is there to show that the coronavirus rates have reduced and stuff with lockdown, and now obviously the vaccinations and stuff. So, I'm not anti-lockdown at all. I think it was the right thing to do to keep people safe. But it was an awful time. But I think now, I'm kind of, I'm feeling positive. You know what I mean? Hopefully, we're sort of on our way to things going back to some kind of normality. And obviously, now sort of shops and restaurants and things like that are open. You're allowed to go back inside, like pubs and all that kind of stuff now. And and the opportunities for socializing, and seeing people that have, you haven't seen for a long time, family, friends and stuff. And, even tomorrow, like I just mentioned to you, I'm going to go and have a game of football with some of my friends that I haven't seen for quite a while. And I think, so I'm feeling positive at the moment. But I think, the second lockdown, it hit a bit harder just because it seemed to be dark and cold and miserable all the time. And everybody being confined to being at home, it was a tough one. But at the same time, like I say, Charlotte, I am very empathetic around, there were people in much worse situations than me. I was lucky enough to be at home with my wife and my stepson, so I wasn't on my own. But, sort of people, that are on their own, kind of my heart goes out to them really, because it must have been a really, really difficult time.
Yeah, so you mentioned that you just got married last year. So obviously I don't know if you and your wife lived together before the lockdown but I know that during the lockdown, especially with couples living together, it put a lot of strain on their relationship. Did you fight that with yours, or were you able to work through it?
Well, I think, to be honest with you, you know, kind of me and my wife are very lucky. I mean, we did live together for, I think, about 4 years, I think, before we actually got married. So, you know, we were very much used to being together. But having said that, you know, kind of we would, yeah, we were both at home together a lot more than we would have
Yeah.
been. So obviously before we would have been out at work and stuff like that, and even weekends, you know, some weekends she'd be out with her friends and I'd be out with my friends or whatever. So, you know, it wasn't like we were at home together all the time. And then when lockdown kicked in, obviously it was. And I think, again, to be honest with you, Charlotte, like the first lockdown, if I'm being completely honest about it, you know, kind of coronavirus was an awful, awful thing. And I know that a lot of people lost their lives, but I think if I'm being completely honest, there was a part of me that when the first lockdown kicked in and I heard the, you know, kind of the media and the news and everybody were talking about things like Glastonbury being cancelled and the Olympics
Yeah.
being cancelled and the Euros and all these massive, massive events all sort of, you know, being cancelled. And I remember saying to Chantel, like my wife, saying, you know, kind of, you know, I'm a bit fascinated and intrigued to see where this is going to go, because I just couldn't for 1 minute imagine that events like the Olympics, for example, is one of the biggest sporting events in the world. And I was thinking, there's no way they're going to cancel that, you know, sort of. And there was a little bit of fascination there to see where it was going to go. And I think, but then, so kind of, and then being locked down with my wife, I kind of at first, the first lockdown, we were like, yeah, you know, this is great. We get to be at home together all the time. And it was quite nice. But I think going into the second lockdown, I mean, during that as well, in November last year, we actually moved from a flat into a house. And I think, you know, that helped us, because going into the second lockdown, I suppose really, yeah, want of a better way of putting it, I suppose the novelty of lockdown had worn off a bit. And it had got to the point where, okay, we know what lockdown's all about and it isn't that great. You know, we want to be able to have our freedom to go out and do what we want to do. And I think, you know, luckily we get on very well. And it wasn't as if we were, you know, kind of arguing or you know, getting upset being around each other. But one thing that you know, we did find a bit difficult was that obviously, you know, both of us having to work from home, kind of what we'd found is sort of, you know, I'm in the dining room, for example, and I've kind of taken over our dining room table, set it up almost like an office station, like you'd see at work, you know, with the
Yeah.
big monitor there and laptops and leads and wires everywhere and all that. And then, because, you know, Chantel needs to work as well, so she's in the living room on the sofa, she's got all her laptop and stuff out, and both of us are in meetings over Teams a lot of the day. You know, so it's about kind of, and also as well, on top of that, we've got my stepson here and he's 19, so, you know, this is his home. He wants to be able to play his music and, you know, watch his movies or whatever he's doing and stuff, you know, and not that he's here all day, every day, because he's out doing his thing as well, obviously. But when we were locked down, he was here. So, you know, it was kind of trying to balance that trying to keep a kind of working environment, if you like, and a professional environment, whilst also trying to, it's a home, you know what I mean? So it did put a bit of pressure on, and it did kind of, we had to, you know, compromise at times, and we had to make sure that we were kind of respectful with each other and stuff, you know. And if I needed to go upstairs to get something, I have to walk through the room that Shan's working in. So I've got to make sure I'm quiet, because she might be on a meeting or whatever. And likewise, if she wants to come in the kitchen, it's right next to where I'm working, so she's got to be quiet. And it, you know, and it's just a bit, both of us actually, since we've been returning to the office, both of us have said, you know, that we've really enjoyed going into the office and seeing people, and, you know, kind of a bit of a change of scenery. And whilst we love each other and we love being around each other, it is also nice just to see other people for a bit, you know, and there's nothing wrong with that. You know, we're more than happy to be together. We love the time that we spend together, but at the same time, we're not a couple that live in each other's pockets all the time. You know, we've both got things that we like to go out and do. Like, for example, I'll go tomorrow and play football, and, you know, Shan maybe will go off and see her friends or her family or do whatever she's doing. You know what I mean? So we're quite lucky, but I think I can completely understand how it might take its toll on people. And especially, I think, you know, we were lucky that we were able to continue working throughout the lockdown, even though it was working from home and working remotely. But for people that maybe got furloughed or weren't able to go into work, you know, that brings with it its own stress, like sort of finances, how they're going to pay the rent or the mortgage or the bills. And, you know, so you've got all of that stress, and because you're confined to your home, apart from going out for a walk or whatever, you know, there's not really a lot of ways to relieve that stress. So, you know, again, I consider myself very lucky in those circumstances, and kind of, you know, sort of have a lot of sympathy, I guess, for people that maybe, you know, weren't so lucky and had all that additional stress of, you know, being able to feed their family and pay their bills and all that sort of stuff, man. That must have been really difficult.
So like I take it, like, you know, the lockdown has made you appreciate stuff that you wouldn't necessarily appreciate, you know, like for example, like we just discussed being in being in a marriage, you know, because for example, like me, I'm in a long distance relationship, but you know, I'm quite lucky as well because I was able to go to, you know, Scotland and come back, and you know, having that person to kind of share whatever you're going through, you know, that's quite vital. And so, you know, especially like people that are going through depression or anxiety, or if they're just having a really messed up day, you know, like, you know, for example, you've just had a bad meeting at work or online or whatever, and you're like, you know, I need someone to talk to, and at least you've got Shannon that is quite sympathetic and like, okay, you've got someone there to encourage you. So I guess that, you know, having the lockdown did kind of bring a positive thing in a way. Would you agree?
Yeah, no, I do agree with that. And I think that's where, you know, like I say, you know, I think you're absolutely right. You know, it does make you appreciate, you know, what you have in your life and how easy it is to take things for granted sometimes, because, you know, Shan is very supportive of me. And I'd like to think that, you know, she would say the same, you know, that I am for her. I think part of it though as well is kind of, you know, say for example, like you just said, if I've had a stressful time at work or whatever, or had a, you know, a bad meeting or something's gone wrong, or there's, you know, maybe it's just the volume of work, it can be a bit overwhelming sometimes, like how am I going to get everything done on time and stuff like that. And I think when you're in the office or whatever, or when you're surrounded by your colleagues, you know, you've got people that are in the same team as you, understand the tasks and the pressures that you've got, you know, got on you as you know, as a professional or whatever. And I think, you know, you could turn around and have a chat with a colleague before you leave the office, or you might come out of a meeting with someone who's been in the meeting with you, and you might be like, oh man, you know, that meeting was hard or whatever, you know, and you can have that little bit of a debrief, even though it's very informal and kind of off the cuff.
Yeah.
But that's where, you know, kind of when you're at home, if I've had a really difficult day kind of working or whatever, you know, and I'll be honest, Charlotte, I'm not that good at doing this, but it's about trying to, you know, switch off so that I don't then go into the living room and start projecting all of my stress onto Shan, because although she's very supportive, bless her, but if she's had a rubbish day as well, the last thing she needs is me going in there and then, oh, this has happened, and just throwing it all onto her, because then she's had a rubbish day herself, but she's having to absorb all of my stress as well, you know. So that's something, and like I say, you know, I'm not that good at doing that, you know. Like I probably would go into the living room, project it all onto her, and then realize I've done it afterwards, and then be like, oh look, I'm really sorry, you know what I mean, it's not fair of me to do that, but it's too late because I've already done it. Do you know what I mean? So it's kind of about learning from your mistakes as well, you know, and sort of reflection. And obviously, you know, that is something that, you know, like I say, I'm very lucky that she is so supportive, you know. So but I think, no, it's, you know, it does make you realize how much you take things for granted, you know. And I think, you know, not just in my relationship with Shan, but also seeing friends and stuff like that. And, you know, also kind of a friend of mine, a very close friend actually, you know, I won't go sort of into too much detail, whatever, but close friend of mine, over sort of in between the two lockdowns. When the lockdown eased kind of last year, sort of, I don't know, I forget when it was, kind of around August, September time or whatever, he actually sort of started seeing somebody for a little while. And then that kind of unfortunately didn't work out. And he's quite a sensitive and emotional guy, and very kind of, you know, he kind of analyzes himself quite a lot. And you know, the relationship didn't work out, and the girl that he kind of, you know, had a bit of a thing with, she was kind of putting a lot of the blame of it not working out onto him, and it was making him feel really low.
Yeah.
And he phoned me one day as well. Plus, he had some stress and pressure because the job that he does, unfortunately, you know, he wasn't able to continue doing that, so he kind of effectively got made redundant and
Yeah.
stuff, and all of that. So his life changed, you know, quite a lot in a short space of time. And me and him spent some time talking on the phone a little bit, because he was worried about his mental health. You know, he was feeling ways that he hadn't felt before. You know, I'm not giving any names or anything, so no one would ever know who he is. And I'm sure, you know, if ever he listens to this, he wouldn't mind me saying anyway. But he phoned me one day and he just said that he was really scared because he'd been driving home from work one day. He knew he was being made redundant, but he wasn't actually redundant at that point. And he said that as he was driving down the motorway at kind of, you know, 70 miles an hour or whatever, he was driving over a bridge. And he said that just for a split second, the thought went through his head, if I just swerved left here, I'd go off the bridge and it'd all be over. All the stress and everything would just be gone. And, you know, it broke my heart to hear such a close friend thinking like that, even though it was just for a split second. And luckily enough, he never did it. You know what I mean? And he'd never thought about it before. It wasn't something that he was even aware that he was feeling that low. But he said to me, you know, he said, well, to use his exact language, and apologies for my language, but he said it frightened the shit out of him. And he said to me, what did I think he should do? And I said to him, well, the first thing that he's done is the right thing by talking about it, you know, and not keeping it to himself. You know, and obviously I think I probably mentioned it in the last one, Charlotte, the last interview that we did, but, you know, I'm an approved mental health professional now. Like, I go around doing mental health act assessments for people in the community, and that's not, I know our job together is in the learning disability team, but, you know, when I do the mental health act assessments, it's not learning disability specific, it's, you know, sort of anybody. And so kind of, you know, I guess I've got a bit of experience in that area. And I said to him, you know, that he said, what did I think he should do? And I said to him, well, I think you should talk to your GP about it, because, you know, sort of there's options out there. You know, and he said to me, oh, but, you know, what they're going to do, they're just going to put me on medication, like, you know. But I said to him, the thing is with it is he's already, I said to him, you've already taken the biggest step, because you've had the courage to call me and tell me about it, because it's not an easy thing to talk about. And I said to him, you know, that trying to bottle it up and deal with it himself, he probably would have felt even worse. So I said to him, go and have a chat with your GP. I said, even if the GP does prescribe you some medication, I said, you know, it doesn't have to be for the rest of your life. It'll be for as long as you need it. And I said, if you're feeling that low, you know, maybe whatever the doctor will prescribe for you will just give you that little pickup to be able to put in place what you need to do to feel better in the longer term. So he went to see the GP, and the GP did kind of prescribe him some medication. But what me and him spoke about was kind of the medication part of it. There's nothing wrong with that, you know, and I'll come on to a little bit more, because I actually watched a documentary last night that I would recommend men especially to watch this, so don't let me forget about that. But I said to him, it's like, you know, taking medication can be like putting a plaster over a cut, you know, so the cut doesn't go away, but you can't see it. So kind of having the medication can make you feel better mentally, but it doesn't change necessarily, you know. And for some people, it can be, you know, kind of more a sort of biological thing, you know, it's just the way the brain works that people can feel low, and they may need that medication for the rest of their life possibly. And there's nothing wrong with that. If that's what people need, then they need it. You know, if it was a physical health issue, lots of people take lots of medication for various physical issues and no one bats an eyelid at it. But for some reason, when it's mental health medication, there seems to be a bit of a stigma around it.
But do you think it's because people can get addicted to it, and do you also think it's because, so this is my thing, and I think I said this on another podcast with some other people. So I believe in alternative resources. So for example, instead of a doctor prescribing you with a medication, why don't they say, okay, well, you know, if you're feeling low, you know, why don't you go for a walk, or why don't you try some kind of martial arts or some kind of yoga? So I mean, yeah, what's your interpretation on that?
I think you're absolutely right. Okay, let's get that point clear, because what I'm trying to say is, I guess, is that medication isn't necessarily the answer, but I wouldn't ever want to offend anybody or have kind of a view that as if I'm saying, anybody that experiences mental health difficulties, as if everybody's the same. And I think that's part of it. You see, everybody's different, everybody's unique, everybody's individual. So like you've just said, there are a lot of different things that people can do that can boost their mental health without needing medication and things like that. So, that's exactly the point I'm going to make, because what I kind of said to my friend was, he's a very kind of active guy in terms of going to the gym. He loves all of that. He goes out running regularly, and he's a very fit and healthy guy. He doesn't smoke. He does drink alcohol, but not to the point that it's abusive. He'll enjoy a few pints at the weekend with his friends or whatever, and stuff like that. But he's not, it's not an issue for him or anything, and he doesn't abuse alcohol in any way. So, but kind of what he was finding is, even though he was still going out running, and obviously he couldn't go to the gym because the gym was closed during lockdown. So that had hit him a little bit, because he had certain friends that he would go to the gym with all the time, and he wasn't seeing them because they couldn't meet. But he was still going out running, and he was still doing a bit of weights and stuff at home and all the rest of it. So he was doing as much as he could physically. But I think because of the pressure of the job situation, and then obviously he had this situation with this girl, and like I say, he is a sensitive and emotional guy, and he really liked this girl, and it knocked him for six when she sort of ended, their relationship, if you like, even though it was kind of still in the early stages. But I think he thought, they were really onto something good, and he was, a bit shocked. So, but what I kind of said to him was that, you're absolutely right, Charlotte, because the thing is, it's about, for some people, and like I say, not everybody, because some people, it could be the way that their brain works, that, they may, be more prone to feeling down or anxious or, depressed, and maybe medication will help them for the longer term. But for some individuals, like my friend, I said to him, like, when you're taking the medication, it's about being able to feel motivated to be able to try and put right the things that are bringing you down in the first place. So, for example, he was feeling so down that he didn't really have the motivation to start putting applications in for other jobs and looking for other jobs, because his confidence had been smashed, especially because this girl, like I say, she actually turned out, she was quite nasty to him with some of the things that she said. And, I spoke to him about that and tried to reassure him around kind of some of the things that she'd, put on him. It sounded very much to me that she was kind of looking for reasons. She was a bit scared to take the plunge and go into a relationship. So she was trying to put it on him as to why it couldn't happen. But anyway, like I said to him, what you need to do, I said, is you need to find ways to boost your confidence again. And maybe, you just need that little pick me up for now. That's, and like you said, there are addictive qualities to a lot of these medications. So it needs to be managed carefully. And that's why he needed to go through his GP to do it, because, it needs to be monitored and it needs to be done carefully. So, and he did go and see his GP, but what his GP did as well was his GP put him in touch with a counsellor, because he did have some issues kind of going back to like his childhood, and even kind of to do with his parents and stuff. He'd found out that the person that he thought was his real dad actually wasn't, and stuff like that. Okay. So there was a lot of stuff going on for him, even though it didn't change their relationship. They will always be father and son, because, so... but he went and saw the counsellor, and he kind of, and he, at first he was saying to me, what good is it going to do me going and opening up my life story to someone who doesn't know me, a complete stranger. But I said to him, these people are professionals in doing this stuff. And sometimes it can be easier to talk to a stranger, because when you're talking to one of your friends or somebody that you might be a bit more guarded, because you don't, you sort of there. You might be a bit reluctant to share everything unless you've got that real close bond with a friend, and it's just, I think sometimes, with a professional, it can be different. But luckily enough for him, it really did help him, just kind of talking about things and doing it with a professional helped him understand that there were certain issues that he'd carried with him for his whole life, that he'd kind of put in a box and hidden away at the back of his mind, but they were always still there, and he'd never addressed them and never talked about them with anybody. So, and I said to him, even the fact that he told me about all that sort of stuff, I never knew that. And I know, his dad and stuff like that. And you know, and it was just, you know, I said to him, that in itself takes a lot of courage. So you've got to give yourself credit for that, you know, but sometimes when you're feeling depressed and down and stuff, you can't see the positives in yourself. You only see the negatives.
Yeah.
So, you know, and that's why, you know, now, luckily enough, you know, bless him, he's in a much better place. I was speaking to him yesterday and he's laughing and joking with me like he always does. And, you know, and he's in a much better place. He's got himself a new job. You know, he's completely over the sort of situation with the girl that he was seeing. And, you know, he's kind of, you know, sort of, yeah, feeling much better and much more positive about himself and also the future. But, you know, I think the thing is, Charlotte, like I say as well, with the medication bit, it certainly isn't the answer to everything. And there are a lot of alternatives that people can do. But I also think as well that there seems to be a bit of a stigma around it where, you know, if say, for example, people will take medication for physical conditions all the time. You know, people take it for like blood pressure or, you know, kind of whatever it may be, whatever the physical issue is. And no one would bat an eyelid at that. But for some reason, if you take medication for mental health, you know, it comes back to like we talked about in that first interview, you know, for blokes especially, I think, I don't want to stigmatize, but, you know, I think for a lot of men, having a mental health issue or problem is almost seen as if it's a bit of a weakness. And yet, if a guy has a physical health complaint, that's not seen as a weakness. But for some reason, when it's a mental problem, you know, it can be seen as a weakness. And I think that's where, you know, kind of it like I said about my friend, it's about, and going back to the first interview, it's about having the courage and the strength to be able to, you know, speak up and say, actually, I'm not okay. And there's lots of services out there that can support with that, like Calm and Mind and other ones, you know. And I think Calm is the campaign against living miserably, isn't it, and stuff like that. But, you know, and that reminds me, like I say, I watched the documentary last night. There was a guy on Good Morning Britain, I think last week or the week before, and his name's Joe Marler, right? And he's a rugby player, professional rugby player. And he was on there because it was Mental Health Awareness Week, and he was on there promoting this documentary that he'd done with Sky. And he suffered with mental health problems and depression. And he's got a lovely wife, and I think at the time he's got like a family of like 3 kids and a 4th one on the way. Lovely house, earns a really good living out of rugby, gets to see all his friends every day, you know, when he goes into training and when they're playing matches and stuff. And he says, you know, he has everything, you know, he's in a very privileged position. But he said that he found that he was driving into training, and he said that he wouldn't ever show any of his symptoms in front of his wife or his family. But suddenly driving into training, he was finding himself in floods of tears. But he said that part of his job as a rugby player is to be a bully when he's out on the pitch and almost bully the other team into submission so that his team wins the rugby match. And, you know, we all know what a tough, brutal game rugby is, you know. And he was saying that he felt he didn't want to open up in front of his wife and his family because he didn't want to cause them concern and worry about how he was. But he also didn't want to open up in front of his teammates because he was paid a job where part of his job is to come across as strong and positive. And, you know, and it shows clips of him when he's around his rugby teammates and stuff. And he's one of the jokers, you know, he's one of the at the center of it all, you know, and he's, you know, having a laugh with all his mates. And you see examples where to his teammates, they would never have known anything was wrong with him. You know, but luckily enough, he did have the courage to speak up. He did have the courage to go and seek help. And he said himself, you know, that he does take medication now to manage his condition because it's the way that his brain is just wired, basically. You know, he suffers with depression, and there's no kind of cause for it that he can put right because, like he acknowledged, there's nothing in his life that he wants to put right. He's very grateful for everything he has. He's got a healthy family. You know, he's very well off financially, which I know money isn't everything, but obviously it does help if you've got a nice big house with a lovely garden and you can provide for your family. It takes that stress away. You know, and fair play to him. In fact, I nearly tweeted him last night. I haven't done it yet because I wanted to word it properly, but I want to send him a tweet and just say, you know, fair play and respect for that documentary because he's really put it out there. And he said as well, you know, for his opponents, if they knew that he was suffering with depression and that he was driving into training and driving home from training crying, are they going to think he's weak? And that for me is a prime example of that. You know what I mean? It's seen as a weakness. Like because he was a man, he felt that he shouldn't be crying. And the documentary that he actually did is that's the name of it. It's called Big Boys Don't Cry. But he went to see a counsellor who, you know, professional in doing that, and she helped him open up, and she helped him, you know, kind of try and explore why he feels the way that he feels, and talking about issues, and just being open and honest about the fact that he felt so low and so weak, and you know, and he was only seeing negatives in himself. He wasn't seeing the positives of what a loving father he was, and you know what a liked man he was within the rugby team that he plays for, and you know, and you know, that's what depression does. It's an awful condition, and it stops people seeing the positives in their life and just focuses on the negatives. You know, and I think as well, Charlotte, if being honest, you know, I think what it can do is it can lead people into very negative lifestyles. We touched on it a minute ago, like for example, maybe increasing alcohol intake, or people may smoke more. And I think what tends to happen then is that people, to try and relieve their stress, people may turn to drink or may smoke more or whatever, and they think that, or the kind of your brain would tell you that you kind of, you know, you're minimizing your stress. You know, you're having that cigarette to calm down. The cigarette will help you chill out, or that glass of whiskey or wine or whatever will help you chill out. But really, I think what that brings with it is a bit of a feeling of guilt, because you know it's not a healthy lifestyle. So that makes you feel even more anxious and even more stressed, because really, you know, in your mind, that's probably not the best way to handle it.
Yeah,
And then it's a vicious circle, because then you use it more to try and manage your stress, but your stress actually gets worse.
yeah.
So, you know, that's why depression is an awful, you know, and if, you know, alcohol is a depressant. I mean, I know, you know, kind of I've said in the last one, you know, one of the things that I love doing in my free time, you know, and I certainly don't do it every night, but, you know, I love going out on a Friday or a Saturday night and having a few beers with my mates and stuff like that. But again, I'm in a position where, you know, I'm not dependent on alcohol in any way. And there's a difference between enjoying something and maybe having a few beers socially, than actually coming home and thinking, I need to have a beer, I need to have a whiskey or a vodka, whatever it may be, you know, and that's where I think, you know, it kind of, the lockdown and all of that, you know, sort of people in very stressful situations, you know, when you've had a few beers, your inhibitions come down, you know, then, or not just beers, but any alcohol, you know, one thing that alcohol does do is kind of, you know, or people will say at the time when it has the effect, it can make people feel a bit more relaxed about things or whatever. But when the alcohol wears off, all of those problems come back, and it actually serves as a depressant, because it makes the problem seem even worse. And that's where people then may turn back to the drink to try and feel calmer again. And it can have a real negative effect. So, you know, it's kind of it can, you know, that's why situations like lockdown, when people are just stuck in their house on their own, you know, with nobody to talk to, and if they are experiencing feelings like, for example, what my friend was going through, and they didn't have somebody to turn to and talk to, I would say that to everybody out there, you know, whether it's a man or anybody else, but anybody listening to this, like, if there is anybody that is on their own and they are experiencing those kind of thoughts, pick up the phone or get on the internet, or do what you've got to do to, you know, obviously now the lockdown is eased a little bit, you know, maybe go and speak to the GP, or call Calm or Mind or Samaritans or whoever, because just talking about something can make a bit of a difference. You know what I mean? It may not solve all the problems, but it's a good start. And don't sit there and try and suffer it in silence, and certainly don't try and find the solutions or the remedies in the bottom of a bottle, because they ain't there. They're not there. It will just make things worse. Nothing wrong with having a couple of beers or a drink with your mates on a social occasion, but don't try and find the answers to your questions in the bottom of that bottle, or the answer to your problems, in that bottle, because they ain't there. It will just make it worse.
Yeah, no, because, like, you know, when you just said about, you know, talking to people, that kind of put me back to, like, I think it was like a year ago or whatever, and, you know, I came into work in tears and like, oh, and then I told you about my friend, or not my friend, but my next door neighbor that, like, shockingly committed suicide in front of me, and it was like, you know, like, that day I didn't want to come to work at all, and then I had like certain people like, what's wrong, and like I didn't feel comfortable talking to them, but like, just having you there, like someone just to listen to, and yeah, that, so
It
that
makes a difference.
it
It does
does,
make a
it
difference.
does.
It does. I think, because I remember that very well, Charlotte. And I mean, what a horrific ordeal for you to go through. You know what I mean? That was obviously incredibly sad and tragic. And I think, yeah, and I do remember. And I think, to be honest with you, it's understandable why you would have felt that you didn't want to come into work that day, and I think but at the same time, it's great that we were able to, help and support you when you did. And I think, everybody's different in how they handle occasions, because you may or may not recall, last summer, I lost a very, very dear friend in a car accident, nothing related with COVID or anything like that. But, sort of very suddenly, he was, one of my best friends, very, sort of massive part in my life on a Sunday night. And I woke up on the Monday morning and found out that he's gone, and that was incredibly hard to take. And, I go back to it again. I'm lucky, Charlotte, I've been around, I've got Chantel here, and, she was a rock for me during that time, because it broke my heart. He was like a brother to me. We were inseparable for a long time. And, it was incredibly sad, but I was lucky that I had, Chantel and other friends around, to support. But, the thing is as well, is like everybody's different, because, you were saying that you didn't feel like going into work that day. And I remember, like, the day that I found out about my friend, I went for a walk just round, like, I'm quite lucky, and I live we've got a little bit of a countryside sort of thing around here. So I just went for a walk around some fields and stuff, just on my own. And there's a bit of a river and a lake and that. And I just went for a little bit of a walk, just trying to reflect and take it in, because it was a huge, huge shock. And at that point, kind of, I got a phone call from one of my another friend who, again, is very close. And he said, oh, a load of us are going to go up to kind of where the accident happened, and just sort of pay our respects and everything and all of that. And at that point, I said to him, look, mate, I'm really sorry, man. I said, but I can't do that tonight. You know what I mean? It's just I'm not in a place where I feel I can do that. I'm still trying to absorb what's gone on. I really appreciate the offer, and it was lovely to know that people were there to offer that support. But I also knew that if I'd gone up there that night, I wasn't in a position mentally at that point and emotionally to celebrate his life. I wanted to mourn his loss before I could celebrate his life.
Yeah.
In fact, in I think, what are we, the 22nd? I think in about 2 weeks, it's going to be the year anniversary of him passing, my friend. His name was Glenn. And like I say, one of the best friends anybody could ever wish for.
Yeah, I think I saw a post on your ear.
Yeah, you would do. My Facebook profile picture. I mean, me and Glenn, we played football together since we were young and stuff like that. And we played and managed a Sunday league football team, only at pub level, not any high level or anything. But he was a fantastic football player. But we managed it together. And all the time that I played football with Glenn, he always wore a number 8 shirt, because he was a big Arsenal fan, even though I'm Spurs. But we put that to one side. But he was a huge Arsenal fan, and his favourite player when we were younger was always Ian Wright. And Ian Wright always wore the number 8 shirt at Arsenal. So Glenn, took it upon himself to wear the number 8 shirt. And when he passed away, I phoned his wife, his partner, and the mother of his children and stuff. And I said to her, can I have his football shirt? And I went and got it. And I took a screenshot of the number 8, and that is my profile picture, and will remain my profile picture, because it's a tribute to one of the best friends I could ever have. But, I'm going off on a bit of a tangent there. But what I've actually done with that shirt since is I've got it all signed up by all of the lads that all played football with Glenn. And I'm going to frame it and give it to his son, Charlie, so that his son can see what an important person Glenn was in the lives of so many of us, because Charlie, bless him, he was only, I think, 9 or 10 when his dad passed away, and they were inseparable, like best buddies, and Charlie's a fantastic footballer like his dad, and hopefully he'll have a bright future in the game, potentially. But, I want him to have that, because I want him to know how special his dad was to us. But, like I say, on that day when he passed, I wasn't in a position where, I wasn't at the point where I could celebrate his life at that point. Now, I'm very grateful for the memories that I have with him. I still feel very kind of upset and angry that I won't get to make more memories with him, because he was so young. He was only 43. he still had so much life ahead of him. A group of us all went out to Las Vegas, I think 3 years ago. And the last time that I spoke to my friend Glenn, you know, we were talking about, oh yeah, when lockdown's over, we'll go back to Vegas, we'll go here, we'll go there, we'll get down the pub, watch a footy match and all that. And, you know, he still had so much life and fun to have. And, you know, but then now I feel, you know, that I'm in a position where, you know, I can celebrate the memories that we have, and I'm grateful for those memories, you know, and I want to do the best that I can for his children, and you know, kind of, you know, sort of look out for them as they grow up, and you know, and he will forever be in our thoughts, you know, he'd never be forgotten. But that's where, you know, like you were saying, going back to the experience that you had, you know, you did what was right for you, and you came into work, and I'm really pleased that you did, because even though that night when my friends called me and said to me, come up the road, I didn't want to go, but I had Shan at home and I could talk to her, and if I wanted to cry, you know, I could cry with her and stuff. And, you know, and that made a huge difference. And I think, you know, for if, you know, like you were saying, you're in a long distance relationship, so, you know, you and your partner aren't together maybe all of the time. And, you know, maybe, you know, when things like, you know, something happens, it's, you know, kind of, yeah, it's good to seek that support, you know, from people that you know and that you trust. And, you know, like I say, I'm really pleased that day you did come into work and that you were able to seek support rather than sit at home on your own, because then you just keep going over it. And, you know, without the support, it's even harder. But, you know, that's, like I say, if there's any message I can send out to your listeners, Charlotte, and I know you have a lot, you're doing great with these podcasts, which is fantastic. But I think, you know, that's what I'd say, you know, if you're lucky enough that you have friends or family that you can speak to, you know, and you're feeling, you know, people are feeling low or down or depressed or anxious about things, you know, do pick up the phone and talk to people, you know, because there are people out there that want to help. You know, as soon as my friend told me, like the guy I told you about in the car, when he thought, wow, if I'd quickly just turn left here, everything would be done. I'm so glad he spoke to me. In fact, he's texted me as we're talking. I've just seen his name come up on my phone. And, you know, now I'm just so happy that I do still see his name come up on my phone, because it got to a point where maybe, oh, but that wouldn't have happened anymore. And, you know, that would have been tragic as well. So, you know, we never know what each other are going through. You know what I mean? With mental health, people can put a front on it. People can act like everything's okay. You know, and other people wouldn't know that stuff's there. So, you know, if anybody out there is feeling down or depressed and that, do speak to somebody, because there are people out there that want to help. And if there are people that feel they're in a position where sadly they maybe don't have friends that they feel they can talk to, or don't have family that they can talk to, and feel isolated and alone, there are services out there, you know what I mean? And if you've not, even if you've not got access to a mobile phone or the internet or whatever, go and talk to the GP, because they can put people in touch. And there's support groups out there that people can go to, there's social opportunities out there, and there's, you know, there's lots of different ways that you know, people can try and improve their mental health. So, you know, I really hope that people will, you know, take something out of this interview, and you know, kind of, hopefully it will, even if it helps a few people, then definitely it's worth it, because mental health's an awful thing, and nobody should have to go through it on their own.
Okay, well, thank you once again for doing this interview.
That's a pleasure. I feel like I've done an awful lot of talking, so I hope it's not been too much or a bit, you know, a bit sort of boring for people or whatever. But you know, it's this is a really worthwhile thing that you're doing, Charlotte. You know, I know you cover a lot of, you know, very relevant kind of issues and sort of contemporary issues that, you know, are in the news and the media and stuff like that. And, you know, but with the mental health side of it, you know, I suppose being in the mental health sort of profession as well, you know, through my AMP duties and stuff, I know how important it is. And I've, you know, going out and doing the Mental Health Act assessments and stuff, I've seen how difficult it can be for people. For your listeners out there, you know, please do talk to people, and for you, you know, fair play for doing these things, and hopefully, you're making a real difference to people's lives. So, you know, fair play, and thank you for asking me to do it, because it really is a pleasure.
No problem.